Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another Southern California first, or actually, this is our whole market update, our whole real estate market update for Southern California. I have to be honest here. This video is a little bit harder to make, and part of the reason why this video is harder to make is because I think we are trapped on the world's most boring real estate roller coaster. And one of the things you'll notice is that while we seem to have ups and downs here and there, the reality is nothing seems to change. Nothing seems to move the market. And in fact, today we even have another example of that. The inflation numbers have just come out. You've got regular full CPI, almost 4%. You've got our core inflation at 2.8%. The reality is, if you are the kind of person who has been waiting for interest rates to drop, there is not a Fed governor in office or who could be appointed that I think would be for lowering interest rates at this point. In fact, a lot of the guidance that they've been giving has actually been saying, don't expect anything else for the rest of the year. I think today's numbers really cement that. But let's talk about why this is the world's most boring roller coaster when it comes to the real estate in our market. So let me go ahead and get up our screen share here. Let me just find it in my Windows. There we go. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our active listings. So the reality is, look at how much things aren't really that different. So even if you're talking under $1 million, do we have a little bit more activity in that range? We do. I think that might be a good thing, especially if you're an entry-level buyer. Though I question whether we really have more choice. And I say this as someone who is a practitioner. I am working in the field. And the reality of this market is that our buyers feel like there is a ton on the market, but not very much of it is viable. So I wonder, even with that modest increase in that under $1 million, are those really an increase in viable options for buyers? I would say there isn't. If you look at our $1 to $2 million category, I mean, to be honest, that really hasn't changed much at all. I mean, that's pretty much exactly the same as we were at last year. If we look at our new listings, shocking. We're actually lower this year than we were at this point last year. Now, there were some upticks. I think that a lot of some of the geopolitical things, what they've done is that they've delayed our spring market, right? They've made people take a wait and see approach. And that's why we're really starting to hit that stride of a spring market later in the year here in May rather than in March and April. If we look at our new escrows, that news is maybe a little bit better, but the reality is these numbers, both under $1 million and $1 to $2 million, are almost identical to where we were at last year, meaning just about the same number of buyers are out there putting in offers and getting offers accepted on property. So it's pretty much exactly the same point as we were at last year. And I think what's remarkable here is if you just look at this graph, I mean, when you discount seasonality, like there's really not a lot to these graphs at all. So we're seeing micro ups and downs in the market, but the reality is none of this stuff is very big in terms of movements. None of the things that seem to happen seem to fully upend the market and put it into a new era. If we look at our absorption rate, congratulations. Guess what? Again, we are pretty much exactly at the point we were at last year, maybe a little bit better. It's just really not very different. None of this stuff is very different from where we were at last year. If you look at our close prices, this one is kind of interesting to me. And remember, this chart is based on where the market was 4 to 6 weeks ago. It's not really where the market is now. And I think what's interesting about that is, we've definitely seen kind of 4 to 6 weeks ago, think about where we are from an interest rate perspective. I think that's especially pertinent at the low end of the market. I mean, you look like, again, even on prices, are we that far off from where we were a year ago? Maybe at that 75th percentile high end level, but that's an inherently more volatile market because we have fewer sales. So our stats are always going to be subject to a little bit more variance. But what's funny is if you look at that median price information over there, as well as looking at that 25th percentile, what do you really notice here? You notice how much things are just not changing much at all. So interesting news there. If we let a percent active after 14 days on market, Again, there is not a whole lot going on. We're just not seeing very much of a change from this exact point last year. None of these macroeconomic things are really moving the needle very much on the housing market. It's kind of like we're stuck. I think a way to look at it maybe is I don't know if any of you have played miniature golf, but you'll notice there's that thing where it's kind of got like a little, it almost looks like a half pipe shape. And once your ball gets over that hump, it's going to kind of stay in there and end up towards the hole. It's exactly like that. We're kind of stuck in a little bit of a groove that it's hard to jump out of on either side. If we look at our close to list ratio, this is slightly more interesting to me. We do see that this took a little bit of a nosedive. Again, this is a trailing statistic, and a trailing statistic means it is based on contracts that were negotiated 4 to 6 weeks ago, not contracts that were negotiated last week. So remember, this is a look in that rear view mirror. If you look at our days on market for new contracts, shocking. This number is almost exactly where it was last year, in the mid 30 day mark for both under 1 million and 1 to 2 million. What does that tell us if we see those inventory numbers up a little bit, but our days on market is exactly the same? What that tells us is that we might have some more inventory, but it's not very good inventory that's out there. It kind of confirms that hypothesis that the quality of inventory overall has actually dropped. So even though there might be more homes for sale, I don't know if there are more viable homes for sale, because we're seeing the ones that are going to go, they're going in about the same amount of time as they were last year, despite there being more options. Now, if we look at our affordability, this graph I think is kind of fascinating to me. I see we've got some missing data in there in CPI. The reality is that while everyone loves to talk about how housing has become insanely expensive, the reality is it's not quite as expensive as I think the anecdotal data would tell you. And one thing that I think is especially interesting is if you look here at the relation between those yellow and blue marks, because we've seen a little bit of price easing and a little bit of interest rate easing, believe it or not, these numbers are pretty close together. And, it says up here, indexed to June 2018. I want to go back because I don't think I've explained what this means. So basically what we did is pretend that this is a race and everybody started at the same place in June of 2018. And we can look to see how these items moved relative to one another. So versus June in 2018. So, right, this is 8 years ago at this point. The payment on a median priced home is 75% higher than it was, right? We've actually had quite a bit of inflation like since then, okay? Maybe half of that is really the result of inflation. If we look at our rental index, that is at about, in the low 50s% higher than where we were in June of 2018. So, the reality is, yes, is housing outpacing inflation? It is, but not maybe by quite as much as some of the headlines would lead you to believe. Finally, we've got our prevailing mortgage rates, right? And if we take a look at this, where were we a year ago at this point? We were basically right around the 7% mark. We were actually in a much better position, but you might be asking yourselves, why hasn't the market responded to that? Well, the reality is the reason why the market hasn't responded to that is because I think there are a lot of people that are still waiting on those sidelines, either for geopolitical reasons or they are waiting on interest rates. And sometimes those reasons are actually interrelated to one another. But I'm going to tell you right now, there is nothing on the horizon that says we are expecting wholesale, immediate, huge rate drops. I think there could be some geopolitical items that give you a little bit of relief. I don't see anything moving the needle below 6% in the near term. I just don't see that happening right now at the moment. And I don't see the Fed coming to save you. So if I hear another person tell me that the Fed's going to lower interest rates as soon as so-and-so is the Fed chairman or a new Fed governor appointed or whatever, don't believe it. I think that's kind of hypes and headlines. Doesn't make a lot of sense. So I want to thank you so much for watching this. We enjoy making these videos. I know we moved back to a month. I do promise I've got some cool new content for you coming up here. Stuff related to HOAs. 90% of the new properties being built are in HOAs. So this is definitely something that is important. What else do we have going on? Obviously, questions, comments, we love those. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And of course, if you know anyone looking to buy or sell real estate here in Southern California, we would absolutely love to lend them our expertise and help them out. So definitely pass along our contact information, and we will see you again real soon.